All right, well, fortunately, I'm not in that mess and of mudslinging, which I would have rejected anyhow. I believe that campaigns need to be about education, informing the public of what is important, and I would say simply the most important lie about me is that I can't win. I think that there's no reason why the people of Wisconsin cannot vote Joseph Kexel, Senator of Wisconsin. Very simply, if you voted for me, you'd get something very different. You would have someone who does not have millions of dollars of PAC money behind him. I'd actually be your representative in the Senate. So I believe that that's the most important lie I think I have to fight, is that I can't win. I can only lose if people choose one of my opponents. All right, about the tax cuts expiring in early 2013, I would definitely vote to extend them, but I would do something different. I would extend them indefinitely, no more year by year. Americans pay enough taxes. If you have a budget problem, we have to do it the old-fashioned way, folks. We have to do it through budget cuts. There's lots of places we can cut. The Department of Education, which offers only a third tier of bureaucracy for our children. We have the Department of Commerce, which I don't see why there's any reason for that. There's the Department of Energy, aside from nuclear energy issues, could easily be removed. Remember that Carter created the Department of Energy to reduce our dependency on foreign oil. How has it worked out for us? It's just wasting money at this point. When it comes to the defense, there's places we can cut there by returning to a pure defensive military posture. We stop nation building, we stop trying to be the policemen of the world, and we bring our troops home to defend our borders here in America. And then we have to look at Social Security and Medicare, but I'm assuming there'll be questions on that later. I'll kind of deal with that at that point.
Tax raising bills.
All right, when it comes to tax rates, I think that we cannot raise taxes any further. If you know anything about general economics, there's a thing called the Laffer curve. Increasing the tax rates does not actually increase revenue if it prohibits people from actually doing economic activity. So I would strongly suggest that we do not raise taxes. And again, I'm talking budget cuts here. We have to do something we haven't done in this country in decades. You know, I believe there's actually many places we can cut in just programs which are not constitutional. It's time for us to just grow up and realize, you know what, you can't have the shiny sled for Christmas. You're might have to buy a used one, and that's where we are in our society. We have $16 trillion of debt, and I'm running for office primarily because of that debt, because I have 2 children. They're going to be saddled with a tremendous amount of taxes that would, if we did it through taxes only, you're talking 80, 90% taxation at some point. That's not going to work for any kind of free society.
She's saying she'd cut ag subsidies.
She could what?
She's saying she would cut ag subsidies.
Well, that won't get her elected in Wisconsin.
That'd give me some trouble too, because I think that as a libertarian, no handouts to anyone, including businesses. So that's a free market idea.
Right.
So, well, I would say I could support Gary Johnson's idea of going to the fair tax. I don't think it's a perfect tax system, but it would be far less intrusive into your life. It'd be nice to have a tax system where I don't have to tell them I have children, what my medical status is, or anything else. People don't realize how much you have to give away to the government just to pay your income tax. Plus, people also forget that the income tax is very expensive to prepare for. They say by 2015, we're going to have about $500 billion of compliance costs. $500 billion that we as citizens pay just to do our taxes. A fair tax would have taxes collected as you buy things, like you do a sales tax in Wisconsin. It's a much more natural tax, and the paperwork is much reduced, and it's hard to cheat that. In fact, you would have everyone paying that tax, including drug dealers and a lot of people who are currently running tax-free. So I think that's the best way to go with that. And like I said, a simplified tax system would increase businesses, because when I started my business, that was the last question I had for myself. Am I ready to deal with the IRS where I'm guilty until proven innocent? And they can hold my money indefinitely. So I fully agree that going to a different type of tax system would actually increase our competitiveness in the world, and that's where I'm going to leave it.
Productivity increases have a problem to do with how Congress is working or not working, is what I can think.
Well,
The filibuster rule in the Senate.
Well, I would say the role of Congress is not to run your life. It should be literally a part-time job with probably part-time pay. Now, as for term limits, personally, I don't support term limits, not because I think that people who run for office deserve to be there forever. It's just I believe that a term limit is actually a limit on you, the voter. It's government saying you can't pick who you want. So I think that if you want better people in Congress, it's your job as a voter to put them there. And when they don't do a good job, it's your job to fire them. Very simple. To sit there and say we're going to have government automatically fire your congressman because you're not willing to do it, it doesn't cut it. We need voters who are willing to do the job as voters. And I would say if we had a part-time, well, I would say if we got back to what Congress should be doing, they would be repealing literally tens of thousands of jobs, and then I wouldn't have to give up my business to be a senator. I would just basically show up occasionally for little things like interstate commerce disputes, and maybe if there's a declaration of war, I'm sure they can put that on an iPhone. They'll have an app for that. So I don't even have to go to Washington if we ever got invaded. So I think the best place for a senator or congressman to be is at home with his own business or job. He should be a part-time representative.
Can I clap at that?
Tammy's saying,
Oh, this is Social Security?
yes, and the argument
All right,
about they paid into it or
The
not.
key thing about Social Security and Medicare when we look at it is, on average, 10,000 people will retire every single day for the next 18 years. So we have some serious issues there. The fact is, though, I think Social Security could be converted to a private system where the money goes back to the citizens. Yes, they paid in, they should get their money out. I would probably agree with something like a Paul Ryan plan where those who are right at the Social Security level, they're going to need some more help. But, that's manageable. Medicare is a different story. That's not even manageable the way it's designed right now. But with Social Security, if you imagine, if it was actually private accounts from day one, during the 70s and 80s when government grew by borrowing that money and emptying the trust fund, it never would have happened. That money would have been in there for you. You pretty much created a system where we had a big pile of money in Washington waiting for your retirement, and Washington said, well, here's a couple IOUs, we'll see you in 30 years. Now they're going to have to tax citizens to pay for the money that should have been preserved for them. So I believe that our government was corrupt in that dealing with Social Security, and the problem we have today is totally made by government. It shouldn't have been that way. All right, if this is about Obamacare, the question is, I would say we repeal Obamacare immediately. It has already damaged our economy with loss of jobs and increasing the insurance rates for virtually everyone in America. It's already a failure, and it hasn't even fully been implemented yet. So we have to get rid of Obamacare, and if people are concerned about their health, we need to go to a free market system, which means you have to have yourself making choices for yourself. We need to get into nutrition. We need to get into many areas which are private issues. They're not government issues. They're private issues. And if you're going to have any government assistance in these programs for those who are severely ill or have horrible, maybe congenital issues, that would have to be a state or most likely a local program. The federal government, according to the Constitution, has no authority to be involved in health care at any level, including Medicare, which actually sets the prices for health care throughout the country. So I think the health care is your issue, and I think the best way we can help you is by cutting the budget so you can keep your tax money so you can take care of yourself. It seems kind of strange that we're going to give our money to the government to go through a bureaucrat's hand to come back to us in a check. Why not just keep the money in your hand and let you take care of your own health? And you'll have more freedom there than you'll ever have under Obamacare.
Excellent answer.
Well, a good thing about the
She was just defending that
Well,
very
they
same
call it
Well,
Well,
yeah, the thing about the pre-existing condition either too is that healthcare should not be part of your insurance through your employer. It should be private insurance that you pay for. And that way, when you change your job, you don't lose your insurance. You don't have to worry about a pre-existing condition because you have your insurance for your whole life. That's the problem we have now, is that we connected our medical insurance to our employer, which they say most people have 10 jobs in a lifetime. That's 10 times you're going to have to transfer your medical system. So I would definitely say that you have to get the tax credit if there's going to be one, but I don't recommend. It should be on the employee, not the employer.
Existing conditions. Which is
I would say
basically
nothing, and nothing's worth keeping. I don't believe in, repealing parts of it. Repeal it all in its entirety. Just plainly unconstitutional. I would say that there is no exchange that the federal government can mandate to states. Any states that create their own exchanges, like Massachusetts, they're free to do that as sovereign states. The 10th Amendment pretty much says if the federal government doesn't have the authority to do it, it's left to the states or the people. Amazing that the people can manage our own lives without the government.
legislative powers.
My answer on Medicare questions would be simply, the Medicare program is unconstitutional, but we have to transition out to it. At this point, too many people are dependent on the system. We can't just cut it overnight. I wish we never would have had it, but we can't. So the key thing with Medicare is that I would support my presidential candidate's view, Gary Johnson. Block grants to the states, let the states figure it out. We need every state to have different experiments to figure out who gets the care they need, and I would say eventually we should transition it to a completely private situation where you buy your own insurance. And like I said, if you get taxes down, people can afford their own insurance. I would say that if people had their own choice, most people would take a catastrophic plan and pay for all the little things themselves, which they would haggle like crazy on. I mean, it's time to go into a doctor's office like you're going to a rummage sale. So you know what? Can you do it for 4? Can you do it for 3? Okay, 4 is good. We have to start negotiating on price. The very simple thing about the free market is LASIK surgery and cosmetic surgery over the last 20 years has reduced in price about 30%, and the quality of these procedures have just skyrocketed. I had a friend of mine whose mother got the wrong LASIK surgery. She had a common name. Guess what? In 6 weeks or so, they redid it and fixed it. That's advancement. I think technology is the best way to solve our medical issues because as we get smarter, the costs can come down. So I think healthcare, I'm not afraid of healthcare. I think if we get the government out of healthcare, like out of the FDA and all these interference in the free market, we'd see dramatic technological changes that would give us the healthcare that we want at a fraction of the cost, not much unlike the cell phone. 20 years ago, the cell phone was the size of a bread box and it cost literally thousands of dollars. Today, everyone can afford a cell phone, in contrast to the government who thinks they got to buy them for you. But I believe that most people can afford a cell phone on their own, and I would suggest that we can afford medicine too once we get the government out of the way. My view on Israel would be this. I believe it's a sovereign nation that has more than enough resources to defend itself without our assistance, and I think they would probably do a better job without our help because they could make the decisions they need to do directly, including maybe figuring out how to have peace. I think sometimes when America gets involved in these situations, we just muddle up the situation. For example, all the wars we've had in the Middle East, we've killed literally hundreds of thousands of people. And as an ally of Israel, then Israel has pretty much part of the blame for that. That does not help the peace process when we're killing people all over the place. I think we should, personally, I feel we should withdraw from the Middle East, keep our money, and trade with them. So this is something which I think people have to understand. Not invading a country does not make you an isolationist. If you trade with people, you get to know them, you can become friends with them, and then peace will then come from that. You get peace through trade, not through raining bombs on peoples all over the world. I would say, first of all, I hate to say this, Iran's a sovereign nation, and if they do not want to abide by the Proliferation Treaty, that's their option. But I believe, truly, the #1 reason Iran wants the bomb is not to drop it on Israel. They want the bomb to keep the American forces from invading their country. We have to understand that. That's why Korea got the bomb. They want us to stay outside, and guess what? America does not invade countries with the bomb, very simply. The losses we would have would be horrible. You could lose literally dozens of divisions in a single strike. And I don't think any president would want to tell the American people that he lost 50,000 troops in a single day. So obviously we do pick fights that we think we can win, and I think that most countries want nukes because that's the equalizer. The question is about Afghanistan. I would say one simple thing. I do not have a very complex plan. It would be simply bring the troops home immediately. They do not need to be there. The fact that the police who are trained by us turn the guns upon us tells you it's time to leave. It's not our fight, and I think that they have to manage the country that they call their own themselves. We don't have a declaration of war, so I don't believe Congress needs to fund it. Congress could say this is an illegal war and we're not going to fund it anymore. It's not the best way to end a war. I would like our commander-in-chief to bring the troops home properly, but the reason we have a constitution is if a president does something that the people don't like, the Congress can still stop it by cutting the money. So keep that in mind. It's not the best way to end the war, but I would not exclude that possibility. All right, this is about foreign oil. The person asking the question inferred that the number one reason we're in the Middle East is for oil. I disagree with that. We're there to control those countries in general. I believe that we can have plenty of energy in America when the government gets out of the way. The fact is Obama has put mandates preventing oil exploration in the Gulf and in many other areas. Yeah, if a government says no to every option to have domestic oil, then you should not be surprised that we are reliant on foreign nations. In fact, America has fantastic resources of coal, natural gas. You actually have tremendous amount of shale oil available, so we do not have to be dependent on other countries, though I believe there is no such thing as really domestic or foreign oil. It's all a commodity on the world market. So, you know, even if we had huge amounts of domestic production, we would not have a dramatic change in the price of gasoline. It just wouldn't happen. But, you know, that's something that we have to look at from a viewpoint of sound energy policy, but that means just let the government, let the free market pick and choose the winners.
Can I say that?
One quick thing about the oil, gas, there is one thing we could do to reduce the price of gas, build more refineries. We prohibit refinery building, and that's the biggest problem we have with the variable price of oil, of gas, is that they can't keep up the demand.
We haven't built a refinery in like 30,
Yes,
something,
or a
70
nuclear
years.
power plant.
Yeah, almost 40, 50 years, I know it's insane.
Next question.
All right, the question is about jobs. I do not believe that the public sector is where you boost the economy. You boost it in the private sector, and if our government wasn't borrowing $1.7 trillion, that money would be available for businesses to borrow and grow our economy. If you really want a hot economy, reduce the regulations. You probably have to repeal Dodd-Frank and some of the other regulations that made corporations flee America. The paperwork is too expensive. As much like I said for the income tax, there's expensive compliance costs of having a corporation in America. And one last thing we could do is actually eliminate the corporate tax. It's only about 9% of our revenue, so if we got really good on our budget cutting, we could afford to get rid of the corporate tax. And it's not a handout to corporations. You have to understand a corporation is merely a piece of paper. It's a legal construct. If you increase the taxes on a corporation, they will increase the prices for products and services. They'll cut compensation to their employees, and they probably cut dividends. So the people pay the taxes that a corporation pays. It just comes in different areas of the economy. So I think that if we want a powerful economy, we cut the corporate tax, but it actually hurts our exports, because the way the VAT tax is used is actually a weapon against us economically, because our corporate tax is applied to every product we sell across the world, while the VAT tax is eliminated before they sell it to Americans. So it would actually level the playing field somewhat with the world markets, and we'd actually be able to invigorate our economy. I think with enough deregulation and tax cuts, we'd have more jobs than you would ever imagine. You know, immigration would no longer be a problem. We're probably begging people to come here to fill these jobs. The thing about the abortion issue, I think it's not a government issue. Unfortunately, for 9 months, you have 2 souls in a single body. There will be conflicts in that situation. And it's a moral issue that the people must address themselves. Just by making abortion illegal won't stop it. If that was true, there would be no marijuana smokers in the entire country today. The fact is, the government cannot impose moral standards. People will just avoid it. The moral battle must be waged at the public level, in the arena of discourse that people have as citizens. I mean, like 2 weeks ago, I drove through an intersection. They had the people with the signs showing the aborted babies, and some people are shocked with that. But to me, I think that's a very honest thing. They're saying, this is what you're doing. At least acknowledge that. That's where this issue must be addressed. We have to educate our children to be more careful about, you know, sexual relations and getting pregnant, because you know it is an avoidable situation. And I think that responsibility is a big part of libertarianism. That this is something I want to bring up more in detail with libertarianism. We believe in personal responsibility, which means personal responsibility for your actions and your outcomes, and finally for solving this issue. All right. Now this one is another one that's a little different for libertarians. This is about same-sex marriage. Personally, I don't care what your sexual orientation is. It is not a matter of government. I'm offended I have to go to government to get a marriage license. The fact is, marriage is something that was once something for the people and the church to manage. We invited government into it. Now we have government programs that give benefits based on marriage, which is why there's a lot of battle for official government acknowledgement. I think that if we got government out of all marriage, including heterosexual marriage, we'd have a much more stable society. For example, without government intervention in the marriage issue, odds are we wouldn't be answering this question in this debate tonight. It wouldn't exist, because private people can meet up and join in a union with any other person. I believe that's a very simple fact of your personal property rights. You own your body, and you own the ability to join into a contract with another human being. That's what marriage is, a social contract. It's actually a legal contract if you choose it to be. But that's something that 2 people do. It has nothing to do with the government just determining what's allowed in it. Are you talking about the invasive species of the Asian carp? Well, that's something I believe, since the Great Lakes have created an association to defend the lakes, it's a state issue at its core. The federal government might be able to provide some resources when it comes to the Army Corps of Engineers if there's benefits in that regard. But you know what? You know, maybe a free market approach might be important. Why not find ways to make Asian carp a delicacy, have recipe contests? I mean, it sounds kind of ludicrous, but you know what? If we manage any animal through the free market, you get better results. If you have too much deer, they increase the willingness to hunt deer. It's the same thing with this invasive species. Unless there's some technology that we could use for it, I think it's going to be a very difficult issue, because you're talking about breeding patterns of wildlife, which we're not that good at controlling the breeding patterns of humans yet. I don't think we're quite ready to manage the carp problem from that viewpoint. So I think we just have to get, you know, we created a problem, we might have to just live with it. They're asking if I would work with other parties. I would definitely work in that. I once joked about tripartisanship. I would work with anyone who believes in the basic principles of our Constitution and the extension of human liberty in America. If you're going to protect our our freedoms, I'm all in to help you. If you want to balance the budget in 2013, I'm all in. And if you want to really get involved in fixing Medicare, Social Security, and ending the wars in Afghanistan, I'll work with anyone who wants to do that. But I will not compromise my principles. I'm not going to compromise those who elected me by making deals that are not correct. Well, the commentator is saying that there's knots in government, I believe, and I think that, read the Constitution, it was designed to be one big knot. We're not supposed to have lots of laws. It was made to be restrictive in that regard.